if I have to start looking online to see if there's a way to cheese the boss battle, that lets me know that this is not good game design for me. And then
This is you with the Baldur's Gate. Or Dark Alliance, sorry.
Dark Alliance, yeah. Well, Dark Alliance was just a hot mess for a lot of reasons. We got a question from our Discord community from Datum recently about boss battles, and about our favorite boss battles, in fact. And I've been thinking about it. Have you been thinking a little bit about it?
A little bit. There's a lot of games to go through with a lot of boss battles, though.
Sure is. And, I have a couple things that I might want to talk about, but while we mull that over a little bit, we thought that we would get onto a soapbox, because I want to say something that I've been meaning to say on this program for a really long time.
Oh.
I actually don't like boss battles. I don't think that they're usually implemented very well, and I don't think they accomplish what they're trying to accomplish most of the time.
What do you think they're trying to accomplish?
Okay, what a boss battle should accomplish, at least in my estimation, is to be the culmination of taking what you have learned in the game so far and applying it to one larger creature. So, like, if I've learned how to do dodges and parries, or I have this new skill that I've just acquired, having a boss battle that lets me utilize that skill in a new and interesting way to show that I've really mastered it, that I've really understood what that is, in something that feels way more epic. What boss battles, unfortunately, usually turn into is, here's a big dude with a lot of health. Kill it. Why? It's in the way. If you don't kill the boss, you can't keep going with the game. The game is over for you if you can't deal with the giant creature with the giant hammer. No more game for you. And I just feel like what it ends up being, and maybe it's just because of the long period of time that I've had to deal with Souls-likes, we're just going to kind of like roadblock off the game until you get through this really big, really frustrating thing that we're going to put in your path to keep you from actually doing anything past that. And they feel out of place. Like, if you're going through the game in the opening stages, and, you take a little boop with the little minions that are out there, and you boop another minion, and boop another minion, and you're kind of going along, and things are moving at a good clip, good pace and everything. Then you hit this one giant wall, and it's a boss. And the boss just stops you from doing that progression. That is where I think way too many games get off rail, and they start to lose me. You'll end up with just a singular boss that ends up becoming so frustratingly difficult I don't want to play the game anymore. Even if I beat the boss after several tries, I'm still like, is this going to be what I have to contend with every single time? So I think that it's not necessarily even that I don't like boss battles. I don't really like the way that they've been implemented in games where they feel so out of place. There's just this one giant, horrible monster that you will not encounter anywhere else in the game, that it sometimes feels completely out of place in the game, but it's a big monster for you to fight, so there's something.
So what I'm hearing is you don't like battles of attrition.
Yes, I don't like battles of attrition.
It's not so much that you don't like a skill check, which is a boss that would be there to make sure you've learned like what to do so far, like how to play the game to a certain point. I feel like you don't like bosses that are there as just here's a ton of HP and spend the next 20 minutes fighting me.
Exactly, and I feel like there's too many games out there that I have had to play. Well, I guess I didn't have to play any of them, but that I have played, where they get into this pattern of saying, yep, you were going to put up a giant shielded boss with a lot of health and a lot of these skills, and we're just going to plop it down to pretty much just put a roadblock in your way so that the game is longer artificially, because now I have to just go through this boss several times, and it will never come up again. Like, the boss will never come up again.
So I think I think for me the difference comes down to when I'm playing a game of the boss battle, it's not so much a big problem. Souls likes I don't really care for, but again, those are skill. You have to use your skills to get over those, and that's one thing. But there are giant HP sponges.
Oh yeah.
In games like MMOs, however, and anything that takes from that genre, like even your Diablos, for instance, your ARPGs, where you've got a boss you can encounter more than once typically. They have, attacks and sequences they go through. Did you play Reaper of Souls for Diablo 3?
Yes.
Yes. The Mathael fight?
Okay.
That one is a really hard boss fight. Because he's kind of a dickhole.
Yep.
Like, second phase, he summons that thing, and it's right there when you get there, and it can kill you almost instantly, so you've got to learn from your mistakes of dying 15 times.
Yeah.
And it's no longer just, like, attrition, it's, alright, you have to use your skills and avoid the obstacles and whatnot. And all the hazards, for instance. So games like WoW, where you could straight up, tank a boss, face tank it, just stand there and take everything. But that's not really the most beneficial way to approach a fight. Like, it's helpful if you know, like, some of the mechanics maybe, like, if you know the abilities you're using, where you should stand, where you shouldn't stand. So I view boss fights in that capacity to be different than, say, your Elder Scrolls. Which, they're similar, they're still boss fights, and they definitely, like Elder Scrolls, they'll telegraph their attacks for you, too. So you learn the attack pattern, you get out of their way, but...
Right.
So it's a little different.
Yeah, there's a couple things that revolve around boss battles that let me know if it's not going to be good. The first thing is if I have to start looking online to see if there's a way to cheese the boss battle, that lets me know that this is not good game design for me. And then... This
is you with the Baldur's Gate. Or Dark Alliance, sorry.
Dark Alliance, yeah. Well, Dark Alliance was just a hot mess for a lot of reasons. And then the other problem is usually where it becomes apparent that you have to grind out more skill levels or abilities before you can actually take on the boss. Like they are basically an equipment check, where the reason why you can't defeat the boss is not because of your skill, or not because you haven't been given the resources necessary or the training, but because you were supposed to grind out 6 more levels, and you were supposed to get, like, at least an epic level of armor by now, and since you don't have those things, you can't pass this, so go back to the drawing board, pleb, and deal with another, 10 hours of just doing monotonous, mindless activities so that you can come back and get through this thing,
And that becomes an issue of scaling, where, say, again, going back to your example of, like, WoW, you're not going to use a level 1 character and go defeat a, level 35 boss in a dungeon by yourself, Like, even at the same level as the boss, you're probably not going to beat them by yourself. You'd have to have a lot of skill to do that, which, some people will occasionally do. There have been people who take 8 hours and will clear current level, like, their level bosses on dungeons and stuff by themselves. They'll take the 8 hours to do it just to say they've done it, but they'll do it, and so it's a skill thing for them, and that's go for it. If that's what you like, do that.
That's great.
But the skill check is you're not gonna, like, use a level 1 character to go defeat a level 70 boss. That's appropriate, I feel. I don't think you should in a game that is the system of. I don't think you should be able to do it. I know people do Dark Souls level 1 runs, for instance, which is different. That's kind of like doing Breath of the Wild without upgrading your hearts or stamina. It's achievable with skill, but that means you're just severely handicapping yourself.
It's funny that you mention, like, MMOs and that, or, where you have to do raid bosses and that kind of thing, because it does feel like this issue crops up a lot in ones that rely heavily on co-op experiences. You'll see this in, like, Borderlands, where they'll get into a few of these bosses that I still hate to this day from that series, mostly because they assume you are going to be playing with multiple people in order to deal with the boss in the first place.
Right.
Because there's that whole thing that a lot of games do, where your progress on a boss isn't saved if you die. You get resurrected, and the boss comes back with full health, so we gotta start back from scratch.
In something like World of Warcraft, as the other side of this example thing, there are quests you'll get that are dungeon quests, obviously. Dungeons are meant to be done with a group of people.
Sure.
But there are also, like, world quests you can do that are suggested, like, 3 players, suggested 5 players, for instance. And those ones, you don't have to necessarily use a group.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've been playing WoW a bit, again, because Dragonflight came out, and so, like, on the character I have right now, I can take a quest that says suggested 3 players, and I'm like, yeah, I don't need anyone else to do this with me generally.
Yeah.
I'll look at the HP and I go, 400,000, I've got 100,000 hit points, I'm like, I can take this. Through skill, you can do it, you know? And I'm not even playing a healer class, it's just like, yeah, no, I can do this. This is fine. Just manage all my resources and my stuns and all that stuff, and I can handle this by myself. So essentially, you're taking a mini boss and just tackling yourself in that case.
Right. The example of boss battles that I did like, they might not really appear on like favorite boss battles when I talk about that, but in the case of something like A Legend of Zelda, what they would do typically is they would introduce a new ability. You get the grapple hook, or you get the little spinny disc, or the bow, or whatever. In the level, you would utilize that in a few different ways.
Yes.
And then when you would get to the boss, you would need that specific skill in order to defeat the boss.
Yeah. I know you probably haven't played Breath of the Wild.
I have not played Breath of the Wild.
But in that one, you're going into the dungeons or whatever to get the abilities that you get, like unlock the new powers that you get.
Right.
And you get the ability at the beginning of the dungeon. The dungeon teaches you how to use it, and then at the end of the dungeon, you have to solve a puzzle, kind of deal. Like you're solving a puzzle through it to figure out like what you can do with this ability in different ways. You know, there's no boss at the end of those dungeons. It's just like, hey, this is how you use this ability that we're giving you now.
Certainly, yeah.
Which is different, but it's nice.
When they introduce those just giant damage sponges, I think that there's too much of a reliance on saying, here's a big cool monster, that we designed. It doesn't necessarily matter if it makes sense right now in terms of the game. Doesn't even matter. We're going to throw a couple zeros behind its health points. It's going to give it a giant pool of health. We're going to give it some real bullshit attacks. And we're going to call it good. And I'm telling you right now, I don't want to play that game. I'm not going to enjoy it. I don't consider it good game design when I see it. I want something that actually matters to the game, that makes sense in the game, but then also utilizes what my character can do so that it feels like there was a reason why I'm at this stage and why this boss is here now. Far too often, boss battles are just an excuse to say, well, here's the next roadblock in your way before you can keep going with the game.
Yeah. I don't mind when they're narrative boss battles and they don't really they're not like huge, gigantic fights, but they're kind of set pieces. Those are fun. Narrative boss battles are great.
If it's the kind of thing where I have to like chip away at little tiny titty-bitty pieces of health constantly, it's not particularly fun. If you're going to do one where it's really hard, I think I'd prefer like the multi-phasic boss battles where it's like, oh, okay, they're getting into an attack pattern, and then you come up and you smash them for like a quarter of their health, and then we've got to do this little thingamajiggy again so that I can smash them for another quarter of the health instead. Because then I can actually see that there's progress being made and not just like see how many bullets that I can throw into them. I'm playing through a game at some point I'll talk about on here right now, where I have heard the boss battles are more of the former rather than the latter, and so if that happens, I'm going to definitely rant about that on air, because I will not be a happy camper. Although I can totally see where it's going to be. I'll save the mystery for another episode of what I'm playing. So I will tell you probably in the next episode about some of the boss battles that I did enjoy, but they are kind of atypical of boss battles, I'll probably be able to explain. And it's for that one reason, getting into arena just like saying, well, here's the walled off arena, here's a big dude that you gotta fight, figure it out, and there's no progression forward before you do it. It seems so limiting in its scope that I
can
don't
talk about both
play.
boss battles you enjoy and some that you don't enjoy, because I can think of a couple that were terrible.
Yeah, I think I talked about one of them on the show last time, come to think of it. But there's more. I'm sure there's more. Don't worry. Anyway, that was my soapbox. So I guess I would just ask everybody, why am I right? Perfect.
This segment is just sort of why boss battles suck.
Yeah, exactly. And why am I right to not like them? Save your favorite or least favorite boss battles for another time, because we will be coming back to talk about that in a later episode.